The park was beautiful today. It was one of those seemingly perfect days where the temperature is just right and the humidity isn't suffocating. I had my book with me, planning to spend an hour or two reading and enjoying nature. I know of the perfect secluded area under the trees. There are two benches side by side overlooking a lazy stream. I've never seen anyone else sitting there, probably because the path to get to it is a bit overgrown and most people don't realize it's there. I get to the benches and I'm pleased to see that I have the place to myself. I settle in and open my book, Harry Potter if you're curious, and start reading. The babbling brook, the bird song, and the gentle breeze make for a perfect spot to relax. That's why I was a bit miffed when I heard footsteps crunching in the leaves behind me. I turned to see an extremely average middle-aged man walking up the path. He came to sit on the bench next to mine. I went back to my book, still enjoying the story and being out in the nature. I was engrossed in the antics of Harry, Ron, and Hermione when the man loudly cleared his throat. I didn't really pay much mind to this, being as focused as I was on my book. It wasn't until the man cleared his throat again, and then another time a few minutes later that I looked up. I wasn't bothered so much as I was wondering if I was going to need to give this stranger the Heimlich. When I looked up, I was startled to find him staring straight at me, making direct, unblinking eye contact. He loudly grunted again. "Can I help you?" I asked. "You can stop making noise," he replied aggressively. I stared at him wide-eyed, uncomprehending. "What?" "You're breathing too loud." "Oh," I said awkwardly. Being the socially inept person that I am, I decided to turn back to my book. It was hard to focus on the story when all I could really pay attention to was my breathing and the presence of the man next to me. No one had ever complained about my breathing before, and to my ears I wasn't making any sound. Feeling self-conscious, I tried to return to the happenings of the wizard world. I turned the page of my book and the guy rumphed so loudly I nearly jumped out of my chair. I jerked my head around to stare at him. "Did you have to turn that page so loud?" he accused. "I was just turning the page, I wasn't being that loud," I said and turned away from him. Heat was rising in my cheeks and I could hear my heart hammering away in my chest. I considered leaving, but I knew that was exactly what the man wanted. He was trying to bully me into leaving so that he could have the secluded spot to himself. "I can hear you blinking," the man growled. This half amused me, half terrified me. No one makes noise blinking. This man was either a troll or insane. This time I didn't react to him. I stared down at the page. I couldn't focus, but I wanted the man to think I was. Beside me, the stranger's anger was festering. He was constantly clearing his throat and shuffling around in his seat. Getting angry that I was being bullied for enjoying the park, I decided to let my impulsive side take over. I loudly flipped the page of my book and grunted. The man flipped out. He launched out of his chair and I stood up too. Instead of coming after me as I expected, the man was jerking around and seizing. I watched as boils erupted from his skin and he grew to twice his size. His clothes ripped as he grew and his skin turned a putrid green. He was turning into the ugliest ogre I had ever seen, forming his mouth into an O. He inhaled sharply. At first, the effects were subtle. A persistent nagging thought wormed its way into my mind. "You're worthless," it said. "Everything you do is wrong. You're not allowed to exist." The thoughts grew worse and worse, suffocating me, paralyzing me. I fell to my knees, despair creeping into my chest. The very air grew colder. Tears began streaming down my cheeks. The thoughts stabbed into my head like daggers. Everything I did was too loud. I was a terrible person. My limbs felt like lead weights. I had no energy to try and run. The monster seemed to be grinning as he sucked the happiness from my soul. His grin incited a tiny spark of rage in my chest. This rage was enough to get me thinking my own thoughts. Absurdly, I began to think of my book. In Harry Potter, the creatures known as Dementors suck all of the happiness from their victims. Wasn't that exactly what this creature was doing? He wasn't a tall skeletal thing in black robes, but he was doing the exact same thing as those monsters do. In Harry Potter, Harry defeats the Dementors by essentially creating light. Maybe I could do the same with this ugly ogre. I was so weak I could barely lift my head. The persistent thoughts were swarming inside my mind, stinging me over and over with their dangerous negativity. I made light in the only way I could think of. I laughed. The creature was taken aback. Emboldened, I laughed again. I thought about the situation and how absurdly my relaxing afternoon had turned out. I continued laughing. The creature shrunk in size. He looked frightened, and his hands began to tremble. I could feel his powers wearing off, and I stood up. "You're nothing more than a bully," I said. "You think you can convince me that I don't deserve to exist? You're pathetic. I know it's okay for me to be here. I know my self-worth." The ogre grew smaller and smaller until he was the size of a rotting pumpkin. Taking a deep breath, I gave the loudest, heartiest chuckle I could manage. The thing tugged tail and ran, tripping over his own feet. To this day, I still laugh at the situation. In fact, it's given me a lot of confidence and taught me how to not be bothered by bullies. The opinions of people who try to tear you down are worth nothing at all. This experience has just reaffirmed that no one can make me think that I am less than or worthless. Bullies will always exist, but I do not have to let them get to me. I have the right to exist. Everyone does. Do not believe anyone who tells you different.